So tomorrow is the final day for ANC branches or branch general meetings to nominate top 6 officials as well as additional members ahead of the party's 55th national conference in December. The Free State and Western Cape have not been able to convene their provincial conferences. The Free State has only held about 44% of its BGMs. Ziyanda Ngcobo is our reporter on this story, watching all the developments over the coming weeks. Ziyanda, a lot to catch up on, and the Free State has said it's working on its situation, but how fast are they moving?
Not fast enough if you think about how the various provinces have prepared themselves ahead of a conference. You'll know that ahead of any ANC conference, usually the provinces would have had an elective leadership in charge for at least a couple of months or a year at the very least, and you get an understanding of what the thinking of the various provinces are. A lot of the provincial leaders are fairly new in their posts, whether you're talking in Limpopo that had their conference in June rather, with KwaZulu-Natal in July, Northwest most recently, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of movement insofar as those particular provinces, but you know that the Western Cape and the Free State have not been able to sit. But what is important, Tembekile, is the fact that it's the last day for BGMs to sit, and we know that the ANC Youth League task team has announced its list, and surprisingly or not surprisingly for some, they are pushing for former Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize to become president, to be deputized by Paul Mashatile, and Fikile Mbalula for Secretary General.
And does that hold different weight, the preference of Zweli Mkhize, given that this is firstly an interim structure and not the Youth League as per its design?
So that's exactly part of the debate, right? That this is a conference where a lot of the leagues are some would describe as paralyzed or non-existent. The Women's League is also a task team. The Youth League is a task team. And at best, I think, if my numbers serve me well, they'd be sending about 10 delegates to the conference in their capacity as a task team. Perhaps maybe you could argue that, these youth leaders are also going to be representing their various structures from where they come from. So not necessarily under the banner of the Youth League, but it's very difficult to measure at this particular point in time. But also there's still the possibility of nominations from the floor during the actual conference. So that's also something that many are saying, you could look out for in terms of what the backdoor negotiations will be like in the run-up. Well, we are in the run-up, but I mean much closer to the conference. Interesting,
just on Zweli Mkhize, that the person they've chosen to nominate is facing an investigation, could possibly be criminally charged. Yes, the other side will say, well, President Ramaphosa may face the same process.
Yeah.
But why him? Why Zweli Mkhize?
So the Youth League is saying that, the reason why they wouldn't back Ramaphosa is that he hasn't been decisive enough. And another critique that has been waged against the president is that he has not actually implemented, policy or conference resolutions following the 2017 conference. And also, some actually place the weakness or the non-existence of the leagues squarely at the feet of the president. And so this is also where the debate over the step-aside rule in its current form also then, comes into play. But we must remember that step-aside, the guidelines were adopted by this very NEC. And we know that there was a rigorous legal process and advice that was given in terms of what the guidelines should look like. So, what I found interesting about the pronouncement by the Youth League is that it only pronounced on one woman, Nomvula Mokonyane, to become Deputy Secretary General, but also not necessarily anybody young that has been pronounced on this particular slate for a Youth League task team.
And Ziyanda, the Free State, the Western Cape, their full process is still outstanding in part. What would be the implications if they don't meet the deadline?
Well, if they don't meet the deadline, then it means then, they may not be able to send delegates to conference. But according to what Bulemabe told, the media last week, the 70% threshold has been met for the conference to go ahead. What it would have implications on is, of course, those who were counting on the numbers of the Free State and the Western Cape as a part of those who would assist them to propel into certain positions.
Ziyanda Ngcobo with a wrap of task teams and more actors than a soapy set. Thank you very much for that update on developments in the ANC.